Alright, so today's topic is on Junko Furuta, and this is based in Japan, and she's a girl who was in Japan, and she was very cheerful, studious, and super obedient, so she'd always follow the rules, and she was actually really beautiful too. So of course, she was very studious, so then she wouldn't really veer off path, so she wouldn't drink or party and stuff like that. So with all that happening, there were a couple guys, and there were a lot of gang members in her school, and there was one guy who actually liked her a lot. So then what happened was he went up to her and he asked her to be his girlfriend, and of course she said no because she's very obedient, she didn't want a boyfriend, and of course he was also in the gang, so she said no, and she basically just let him off. And he came back again and he asked her again, and she said no again, and then he kept asking her again and again and again. And of course, like how there are two sides to every story, there are two sides to this story as well. So many people say that Junko Furuta was just minding her own business, and those guys were just kept asking her over and over again. Like that one guy, he's the leader of that Yakuza gang, and he kept asking her over and over again, and she just kept saying no, and then he just took advantage. And there's another side saying that he kept asking her, and she would always tell him that he wasn't as good looking, or that he was just a bad person, so she just didn't want him, and that she would be rude to him. So there are definitely two sides to this. Believe what you gotta believe, but either way, the things that happened after this could have been stopped, and they weren't. So it all started with a couple of school kids just hanging out, and a guy who had a crush on a girl, and the girl just saying no, and it all just started with a minor puppy love heartbreak. But after she said no, and after the guy got rejected, of course, him being in a gang, he decided to bring all of his boys together and kidnap her. So then he basically went over when she was walking back home, and he basically kidnapped her with all of his guys. And his father was a huge gang member in Yakuza. So Yakuza is a very popular gang in Japan. So I don't want to go too much in depth to them, free publicity. But they're a really popular gang in Japan. And basically what he did was he just kidnapped her and took her away into his friend's house, and then basically just put her there. So that's basically what happened next. And after that, her parents were kind of worried because they didn't get any calls back from her, and she was very studious, so she would never go out partying. So her parents knew that something was up, so then they went to the police, and all that kind of started. But when her parents were trying to get the police, and when everybody was worried, she was still in one of the gang members' friend's house. And that's basically what happened next. Alright, so afterwards, basically what happened was those boys basically just took advantage of her and did whatever they needed to do to please themselves. And they kind of did, they were kind of the playful boys, so they wouldn't really worry too much about school. They were playing this game called Mahjong, which is the chess of China. And that's not a direct correlation, but it's kind of like a game that's very popular. So they would just play that game, and then they would just be drinking, partying, eating food, and this was all happening in one of their parents' house, and their parents were downstairs, and they would just go up to her room, and they would just put her there, and they would just be playing and having fun, and then she would just be in the side, and they would be doing this with multiple girls, because back in Japan, when you're in a gang, you kind of have a lot of power. So then they kind of just took advantage of that, and they just basically did what they had to do. So they were kind of just having fun and playing around, and at a very young age, their maturity level, come on, it's not that high. So they're basically just doing whatever they wanted, and their upbringing is very questionable, but they were basically just taking advantage of her. Alright, in between all this, when all this stuff was happening, it was 44 days when she was basically being abused and being violated. And in that time, she was actually trying to call the police, and she actually found a phone, and she was able to get it. And right when she went to call the police, they basically found out that she was doing that, so they got mad, and then they decided to abuse her even more, and then she went through even more trouble. So then that kind of extended it, and they got even more mad. So the original plan was to just release her, but when she started, when she did the whole phone call thing, they got even more mad. And of course, we're just a bunch of teenagers, because I don't want to take their side, but they are a bunch of teenagers with bad parents, because their parents are pretty much all in a gang, and their parents knew that she was being violated, and all of this stuff was happening, and the upbringing is definitely questionable here. But of course, what they did was wrong, and they basically just took that to the next level, and they were really drunk, so they decided to abuse her and completely be very rude to her, and they were very cruel. And there were just a couple of kids who just got really mad. So there were basically 4 boys. The one boy who liked her, the other 3 boys were all part of the gang, and they were all friends. So the 3 boys eventually got thrown into prison for what they did, but they came out with really light sentences because they were in the gang. so they weren't like charged that much, and their parents kind of took them out, and they didn't really get into that much trouble. So they were, and of course they were all minors, so they didn't make a huge crime according to Japan. So they were off pretty much scot-free. But then that one kid who definitely took everything to the next level by asking around and stuff, he did serve a higher sentence, but that's just because he's like the leader. So Junko Furuta eventually was killed because they just could not put up with her anymore, because she was just like really, she was a very like strong-willed woman, so they didn't really like that. Because in Japan, of course, they have the whole like hierarchy where, you know, women are like very submissive, so they follow that in Japan. So when they thought that she was really strong and very like, you know, smart, they just did not like that. So they did eventually kill her, and to kind of like make sure that no one could find her, they put her in a concrete drum, and they kind of just threw her in with like a bunch of the concrete that was there, just to kind of make sure that no one ever sees it. But that did not work out, as the police were smart enough to know that this happened, so they were able to go and find out that she actually wasn't. There are many movies about her, and basically like all of her death, like basically what happened to her death and how this shouldn't affect other women. So a lot of people are really mad at the boys and how they got released for like very light sentences. But with the whole gang ties and with the whole them being minors, there wasn't really much that they could do. So at the end of the day, the police had their hands tied, so the boys kind of just came off. And of course they did more violent things and they got caught, but they pretty much didn't serve what they needed to serve. So this is a very sad story, and I wanted to make it as neutral as possible. So don't think about this in a way where you're kind of just framing the boys and saying that these boys are absolute idiots and absolute horrible people. What they did was really wrong, but you gotta kind of look at it from the fact that their parents were all gang members, so parenting skills questionable, and they had a lot of money, so they're probably spoiled. They could do whatever they want. They wouldn't really get caught. They didn't have that much like sense of authority. So instead of blaming the boys, I think if we take a deeper look at their lifestyle and structure and blaming the parents, and definitely I'm not saying that the boys, what they did was right, but instead of just having a fisheye lens look at the boys, let's look at the big picture. And maybe if Junko Furuta maybe wasn't rude to that boy according to one side of the story, then maybe she would have been alive. And according to the other side, if the boys have been brought up correctly, then maybe they wouldn't have done it. So there are many different aspects that play into this, so let's not just look at this with a fisheye lens. Let's really expand and look at everybody. And at the end of the day, it's just the mistake of a bunch of parents who just did not know how to raise their kids right. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed, and I really hope that you look at this with a really open-minded view. And if you have any comments or concerns about this, or if you have any more questions, DM me at Jedi.Solomon, and follow me on Instagram too while you're there. Also, subscribe and stay tuned for a lot more videos. And just DM me, guys. If you have a topic that you'd like to hear, DM me and I'll definitely do the topic. Even if it's like this topic where it's really sensitive, I'll still do it, and I'll give you like a neutral point in it. And of course at the end, I'll also give you my opinion. So make sure you guys DM me and ask me for anything that you need. Subscribe as always, and I really hope you enjoyed.